All right, hey, here you go. Chapter 28. We're going to continue now. These are this part of the same notes. Chapter 27. 27 and 28 are both on there as they're going over animal systems. So we're just going to continue looking at the different systems. Now, in the human, you have um, digestion, respiration, cardiovascular, muscular, skeletal, reproductive, urinary. Uh, you have endocrine, nervous, um, reproductive, and integumentary. You have 11 systems in the human body. We're going to be looking at just about all of those, except for some of them. Okay, so we're going to be taking a look today at chapter 28.1. That is going to be looking at the response, or simply the nervous system of animals. Okay, now there's a very, very large diversity here, so we're going to be looking at some generalizations. And one is your nervous system is important for survival. Okay, you've heard of the term fight or flight. Okay, that has to deal with it as well as being able to respond to certain environments, both internal and external. And how do these animals that have different structures and are put into together differently, how do they go about doing that? So we're going to look at some of those. Here in this picture, you have chapter 28. We'll also look at homeostasis. So we'll see how animals in the Arctic can keep themselves warm. We'll look at thermoregulation in different animals, endothermics versus exothermics. We'll be looking at skeletons or body structures and how it relates to here, movement, the nervous system. I have an octopus there, and also reproduction. So homeostasis and reproduction kind of being of the longer sections in this chapter. So those you pretty much be a little bit longer, and movement and structure being probably the shortest out of all of those. So let's jump into it. 28.1. We're going to be looking at response. Like I said, this is going to be your nervous system, and it's composed of one cell. It's called a neuron. Okay, and a neuron really has three functions. It's either going to receive signals, that signal being called stimulus, interpret, or send response. Okay, so you have really three functions that a neuron can do. Those that receive signals are going to be considered sensory neurons, right? They're receiving a stimulus, they're receiving some sort of sense, okay, or sensation. Now, it could be from external or internal environments, such as your pH of your blood dropped, or your blood sugar, or your heart rate. Whatever it may be, your body is going to receive some sort of sensation, or what is called your stimulus. Okay, then you have these interneurons that are going to pretty much interpret what that stimulus is. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how it applies to the human eye when we get there, and show you talk about some examples. All right, and then once that is interpret, you need some sort of response to that stimulus, and motor neurons are going to carry that out. So you have three different types of neurons. You have sensory neurons, interneurons, and then motor neurons. Simply put, they're going to go in this direction, or in this um, order, right? You're going to receive a stimulus, okay, from using your sensory neurons. Then you're going to interpret that that stimulus with your interneurons, and then you will send that response to your motor neurons and carry out that directions over the response. Okay, so first the stimulus, receive it, process it, send it, then you have a response. So it goes in that order, and that works for all nervous systems, okay, or response. So here's an example of a dog, a canine, okay, so you have a brain here. Now your brain is going to be the processing center, so it's made up of interneurons. Okay, and then you have these nerves here, and these are going to be called your peripheral nerves. You don't necessarily need to know that. They just branch out. These are going to be both motor and sensory neurons, depending on whether it's receiving stimulus or it's responding. Your motor neurons are mainly going to be attached to muscles. That's going to excite the muscle, cause it to contract, therefore causing movement, or to organs to work as well. So once again, causing a response if it's an internal type stimulus. So cephalization and specialization. Okay, those are part of the body plans. All right, so we have to look at these. Cephalization is just this collection of pretty much a central nervous system where it's a collection of nervous tissue for the most part. So invertebrates can vary. All right, you're going to have nerve nets, which are these just a net. There's really no cephalization there. It's no centralized part in which they're going to interpret sensory or stimulus from. Okay, and these are going to pretty much just fire all the time. You have nerve cords, which are seen in echinoderm, starfish, things like that. You have different ganglia here, which are just these interconnections of a group of interneurons. This is kind of a brain, but it's different in invertebrates. It's going to be spread out a little bit. You have a head where that cephalization is going to happen, and then eventually you have some that have brains. Now, chordates all are going to have brains. Their brains are going to be structured a little bit differently as they grow. Right, the larger the brain, pretty much the more complex that organism is for the most part. Okay, so we'll take a look at that. Chordate brains really have three structures that are going to be prevalent and important. One being your cerebrum here. Okay, that is your if you look at the brain, the kind of the squiggly looking, that's your typical idea of what a brain looks like. So looking at that, this is going to be responsible for thinking, any type of thinking that should happen, receives and interprets information, learning, memory, and thought. Okay, this is applying to humans. Your cerebellum is going to be responsible for movement, okay, and balance. And then your medulla oblongata is going to control your involuntary actions, or pretty much those things that keep you alive. Your heartbeat, okay, your respiration, all those things are controlled in your medulla oblongata. So here are your different types of invertebrates. You have a nerve net here. You can see there's no centralized nervous system. This is just or sensory and motor neurons just spread out like a big net. Okay, you have flatworms. These are going to be nerve cords. Okay, you have somewhat of it. All right, but for the most part, just sending and receiving. Then finally, you have up here, it's a very small. Now, obviously, their central nervous system is going to be different than what we are used to, but you have a peripheral nerves, meaning that these are going to branch out. So you have a single nerve that's running through here, and then you're going to branch these out. Then you have mollusks. Here you have a brain, you have centralization, you have central nervous system, and then you have a giant axon here that's going to branch out as well to other nerves. And then arthropods, here you have cephalization here up in the head, and then you have nerve cords and nodes here that are going to provide information. And then finally, you have different radial nerves and a centralized kind of thing here for echinoderm. So you have quite a different variety here for the nervous system. And for chordates, you have brains. Okay, so this is what a brain is going to look like compared to that of the invertebrates, right? So vertebrates chordates are going to have brains, and invertebrates are not for the most part. You have some that may have a brain or so that could be, or it could at least be considered a brain, and that's where cephalization is going to be prevalent and it's going to be noticeable. So looking here, you have a fish brain. Okay, so a fish brain. If you're looking at these olfactory one, okay, that's what this looks like here. Okay, olfactory is going to be responsible for smell. Okay, so yes, fish can smell underwater. All right, you've probably heard a shark can smell blood. They also use stink bait when fishing as well. So yes, you have a sense of smell underwater, and you can see that this is much larger for the fish than others. Okay, so 2 is your cerebrum, going over those functions that we already talked about. 3 here is your optic lobe. Optic is, looking at as far as vision. So looking at this, you're going to have a larger section, and really most of the brain is just talking about vision. That's why they have such good eyesight, and using fishing line that they can't see and things they can't see is will helping them see kind of underwater. Okay, 4 is your cerebellum movement. Okay, 5 is your medulla, and 6 being the spinal cord. So kind of comparing that to all of these. Bird here, the eyesight here the cerebrum here is larger. Okay, so if you're a bird brain, or that term bird brain, out of all the animals, it's got most larger other than that of a mammal. So yes, it is a knock on mammals, but if you apply it to the rest of the kingdom, animal kingdom, one of the larger brains. So that's not necessarily the worst compliment somebody can give you, I guess. So if you're looking at this here, you have olfactory for reptiles. They're going to smell a little bit differently. Not all of them, but some of them most likely are going to be using chemoreceptors on their tongue. And dissolved chemicals are going to help with that. Amphibians, there you go. And then you have olfactory here with mammals. Okay, this doesn't necessarily relate to the strength of their smelling, I guess. If I was to put it correctly, that's going to have to deal with the number of receptors. So the more receptors you have, the better you're going to be able to smell. That's why dogs can smell better than humans. Dogs are smelling pretty much what was already there. Okay, not necessarily what's there now, but they're smelling in the past. Okay, and we are currently smelling in the present. So, and that's just because dogs have a larger snout, okay, than humans, and have more receptors. Okay, so this is a breakdown of the different chordates and what they look like as far as their brains. Different sensory systems. Okay, invertebrates vary widely. Pretty much what we're talking about here is the senses. So taste, sight, hearing, smell, touch. Those 5 senses. In the human body, they're going to be considered special senses because they have a certain processing center in the brain. Okay, so flatworms, they're going to have eye spots, and they're just pretty much detecting the presence of light or darkness. Okay, it's going to move away from the light and into the darkness. So that's pretty much how that works. Cephalopods, arthropods have complex eyes and detect motion, color, and form images. Okay, the cephalopod being that of the squids and octopus, they're going to have a complex eye. Arthropods are going to be insects, things like that. You've probably seen pictures of their eyes as well, but they a lot of times can detect motion a lot better than the human eye, and also their color, and able to form images. Okay, so that is going to be pretty much how their eyes are going to be. Flatworms have simple eye spots, like I said, just detect light and dark, all the way into being able to form images. Chordates have a few special sense organs: taste, things that are used for taste, smell, hearing. Okay, So ears for hearing, smell, nose. Like I said, sometimes you have uh, reptiles, things like that, that can use their tongue and some sort of taste sense organ as well. Other things, some species can detect electrical currents, such as sharks, and that is pretty much how they're able to hunt at night or in waters that they can't necessarily see. And also, birds being able to detect the magnetic poles allow them to migrate as far as which is north, which is south, so that way they know which direction to fly for the winter. Okay, so you have different sensory systems that are put in place. And like I said, here are some eyeballs here. So this is on an arthropod. Here's your eye spots on a flatworm. This is a planaria. So very simple compared to this. Okay, and then you have the human eye versus the octopus eye here. You can see the nerve here compared to the nerve here. Very, very more complex actually in the octopus than it is in the human. Now, if you're looking at this, you're going to have to apply the law of lenses. It's a physics term we're not going to get into, but all you need to know is you have receptors here. Okay, this is called your retina. On your retina, you have photoreceptors that is going to receive light. Okay, and as light passes through the law of lenses, because you have a biconcave lens, the law of lenses is actually going to flip the image. Okay, so that image where that waves of light are going to come to a point, it forms here on your retina, okay, or where your photoreceptors are. That point is going to be that image. Now, what happens here is that image is actually upside down, okay, because just based on the law of lenses. So you shine light through a biconcave, meaning two curved outward lens, which your lens here, the structure in the human eye is, it's going to flip and invert that image. Now, what happens here, why we don't see the world upside down, is your brain actually processes it and flips it right side up. Okay, so yes, you actually see the world upside down, but your brain processes it as right side up. Okay, so that's pretty ingenious as far as how your body is going to work. All right, so thanks for tuning in 28.1 and learning about nervous system. We will continue with 28.2, learn about movement and support, pretty much skeletal systems and the muscular system. Have a good day.